if we can start the meeting by asking for the webcasting introduction, please. I've lost.
Thank you. The Chairman would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. Could I also ask members to switch their microphones off when they finish speaking, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we can have apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Bassett, Gabbett, Hadley, Bob Jennings, Judy Jennings, Joggia, Lucas, and we have Councillor Macready on Zoom.
Thank you. We also have, as item number 3, declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest? Councillor Murray?
I think it will be self-evident why I need to make this declaration. It's non-prejudicial, non-pecuniary, but I'm a member of the Epping Forest Heritage Trust and an officially appointed ambassador for that organisation.
Thank you very much. And no other declarations. Obviously, this is a special, extraordinary council meeting. We have more members of staff, officers on the up on this level than normal for these meetings. I'm not going to try and introduce anybody, but we have got present the Chief Executive and other strategic directors. We've got planning officers and democratic services officers who will be keeping a record of the meeting, and also webcasting being done at the end as well. And to my right, Councillor Sunga, who is Vice Chairman of Council. Before we go into the matters of the meeting, I am aware that we've got quite a number of members of the public present this evening, and I would just remind everybody that this is a council meeting, not an open public meeting, but obviously anybody can attend these meetings to observe them and to listen and hear what's been going on. So welcome to you all this evening, but as I say, only those who take part within the discussions this evening are members of council. The item 4 on the agenda is the adoption of the Epping Forest District Local Plan for 2011-33. Before I hand over to the portfolio holder, I'll just read out a short piece about information behind where we're at. Local planning authorities, as I know everybody here will know, are required by legislation to develop local plans, and government has stated that local planning authorities should have an up-to-date local plan in place by the end of this year, 2023. The Epping Forest District Local Plan 2011 to 2033 has now been found sound following independent examination, but subject to a number of main modifications. The local plan forms part of the Council's statutory policy framework. The plan's spatial strategy and housing requirement accords with the approach agreed by way of Memorandum of Understanding, which was entered into by the Council through the duty to cooperate. The Council wrote to the Inspector requesting that they recommend such modifications to the submitted local plan as may be necessary to make the plan sound and legally compliant. The Inspector has found the plan sound, subject to a number of modifications, and these modifications need to be accepted in their entirety, and no further changes can be made to the plan as now proposed to be modified. This means that it would not be appropriate this evening to discuss the contents of the plan. So for agenda item 4, you have 4 recommendations before us this evening, and I will hand over to the portfolio holder, Councillor Nigel Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm pleased that at long last this Council has been given the green light by the Independent Planning Inspector to adopt our local plan, as long as we make some changes to it. As councillors can see from the report, we have two choices. We either agree to adopt the plan with the incorporation of all the recommended modifications, or we don't. It's a simple choice. We can't pick and choose which modifications we do or do not accept. That said, I believe it is important that we have an up-to-date policy framework to enable the Council to properly manage and control development in the district, and to ensure that we can fully protect our natural resources and environment. Once the plan is adopted, the Council will have a clear and robust strategy which can make planning decisions for the new homes, including affordable homes, jobs and the community facilities required over the next few years, supported, of course, by new infrastructure and at the same time protecting our important natural and built environment. The new plan provides certainty for our communities as to what development will happen and where, and makes clear to developers the high standards that we expect from development within the district. On the 14th of December 2017, this Council agreed to publish for comment a submitted version of the Epping Forest District Local Plan, covering the period from 2011 to 2033, and to submit the plan to the Secretary of State for examination. The submission plan was also endorsed as a material consideration in the determination of planning applications and enforcement decisions, and we've been able to use it for that purpose. At the same time, the Council gave authority to officers to write to the independent inspector appointed to carry out the examination, requesting recommendations of any modifications as may be necessary to the submitted local plan. To make the plan sound and legally compliant, in accordance with section 20, brackets 7C, close brackets, of the 2004 Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, the plan that we are recommending to adopt is a modified version of that same plan. Those modifications have been identified by the inspector as being necessary in order for the submission plan to be found sound. Importantly, the modifications do not change the spatial strategy agreed by Council or the housing requirements established for the district, which are based on our own assessment of need, not a nationally derived figure. The requirement can be met from the reduced number of allocated sites and the reduced capacity of some sites within the final plan. The modifications don't change the approach to providing for jobs within the district through the protection and expansion of our employment floor space, or the approach to protecting our valuable assets, natural assets, including the Epping Forest and the Lee Valley. Nor, crucially, do we change our approach to securing the infrastructure and services needed to support the development proposed. This Council, by agreeing to publish and submit the plan, accepted that part of the plan strategy allowed for the release of Greenbelt land. That was this Council's choice as it became clear, having undertaken a considerable amount of work to maximise development within our existing towns and villages, including on brownfield sites, that the only way that we could meet our development needs of the district was to make that difficult decision. We had to demonstrate to the inspector that exceptional circumstances existed for this, and the inspector is satisfied that this was the case. About 31,675 hectares of the district is designated as Greenbelt. The amount of land currently in the Greenbelt, which will be removed in order to provide for new homes, is just under 590 hectares, of which 400 hectares is for the garden communities and just over 130 hectares for the North Weald Bassett, south of Epping and Waltham Abbey North master plan areas. This equates to 1.86% of the district's green belt. It is important that this figure is put into some context. A large amount of the Greenbelt land to be released for new homes relates to the strategic master plan sites. As such, the figures include land which is needed, for example, to provide suitable alternative natural green space on a number of the sites. For example, nearly 30 hectares of Greenbelt land will be used for this purpose at Latin Priory. Other large areas of green space included within the east of Harlow and Waltham Abbey North master plan areas. A number of primary schools, and in the case of Latin Priory, a secondary school, as well as the provision of community facilities such as shops and health facilities, and so on. In the case of east of Harlow, the allocation includes the land needed to support the relocation of the Princess Alexandra Hospital. Some further land within the Greenbelt will also be removed to provide new employment floor space and to reflect the fact that some of the sites, such as the Meridian Business Park and Distribution Centre and the residential estates immediate to the south of Waltham Abbey, which still technically are within the Greenbelt but are fully developed sites. It has been a long journey, longer than we would have wanted, and for the reasons outside of our control, where we finally got there. I would like to thank the councillors and officers, past and present, for getting us over the line. I will therefore recommend to Council that the Epping Forest District Local Plan 2011 to 2033 is adopted in accordance with the recommendations set out in the officer's report. What will happen if we don't adopt? The implications of not doing so are set out clearly at pages 7 and 8 of the officer's report. And councillors may also wish to know that the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Houses and Communities has discretionary powers to direct the Council to adopt the plan if he felt it necessary and appropriate to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And go over to members. Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot of work has been done by officers and members into the production of the plan, and I and other members have attended many workshops and spent hours discussing the concerns of the residents and trying to provide a proper environment for those who are coming, but I still have concerns about the local plan. The inspector notes that Epping Forest has a high proportion of older people and that this will increase. However, their needs don't seem to be adequately addressed. Infrastructure has been a continuing concern, and I and my colleagues have spoken about it at meetings about the local plan. With regard to South Epping, we continue to be concerned about the increase in traffic at the Bell Common Junction and the Wake Arms roundabout. The infrastructure plan seeks to move people from car driving to cycling and walking. Some will do that, but others need access to a car. For example, community midwives who are going all over the area, people who need to take a lot of equipment in to do their job, and some older people whose ability to drive to near where their destination is helps them to maintain their independence. The new multi-storey car park at Epping, which is providing car parking for the high street, is a concern because it doesn't provide for all the parking that's needed for people coming to the leisure centre, just provides for what is being lost in Bakers Lane and Cottis Lane, and doesn't take into account of the other parking that is currently at the current leisure centre. Most members will be aware that in December, Michael Gove wrote to Conservative MPs telling him of changes he is proposing to make the planning system. He said in his letter, local housing need figures should be an advisory starting point, a guide that is not mandatory. It'll be up to local authorities working with their communities to determine how many homes can actually be built, taking into account what should be protected in each area. And one of the protections that he mentioned was our precious green belt, as he described it. Michael Gove says that authorities that are well advanced in producing a new local plan, but the amount of land to be released needs to be reassessed to benefit from the proposed changes that he's going to make. He's giving those authorities a 2-year period to revise their plan and get it adopted. Some local authorities have already paused their plan, and I think we should do the same in Epping Forest so we can benefit from the changes that he is proposing.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, did you wish to come back on any of that or not?
No, that's a statement, not a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Pond.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, members, it's been a long time, hasn't it? And I was rather hoping that you, Chairman, would be announcing a long service medal for those of us who gave out several dozens of our weekends on workshops and so forth. Now, it's 15 years, in gestation. Many mistakes have been made. Some of the most objectionable features of the Section 19 submission, which you were referring to, Councillor Bedford, in 2017, have been removed. Some features are still there. I'm not an Epping member, but I do find the conversion of the burgage plots of the medieval market town into a dense agglomeration of small flats objectionable. The conversion of a lot of greenbelt into housing, that will remain concrete forevermore. Now, much of this is, of course, following the government diktat, the housing numbers, and haven't they been through many iterations in the time this local plan has been going through? This had several incarnations. Those of you with long memories or long in the tooth like me will remember the East of England plan, which was excoriated by the then opposition and now administration, as if John Prescott was the devil incarnate. This was repealed by Eric Pickles when he became Secretary of State, but wasn't much improved. Then there was the issue of G&T, which is not so much the alcoholic intake of members of the council as provision for gypsies and travellers, and that more or less paralysed activities on our local plan for about 3 years. This was the obsession. Then there was the obsession of one particular member who thought the open space that the London County Council had given Debden was much too good for the council house plebs who lived there. That led to the meeting in December 2017 when the Section 19 plan was submitted for inspection with many of those defects embodied in it. It led to an inquiry in public when the shortcomings of the poor advice EFDC had been acting on were laid bare. But members, all that is in the past. We are where we are, with a plan which removes a sizable chunk, 1,500 acres of the Greenbelt, some in the most inappropriate places like South Epping, which has still too much housing in the south, where the people will rely not on public transport, because there is very little, but on the private car to get to and from Epping town. And that brings me on to infrastructure, because the one artery which all this area in the south and western district relies on is the Central Line. And we now know that is the Central Line, which is too full, it is outdated, and it will not be substantially improved until after 2033. So, following the Central Line, we then come on to Epping Town, which, in my opinion, has been systematically crammed. Some have called it the rape of a medieval market town, but Epping councillors seem to have gone along with it, and they predicate their argument very much on the erection of a multi-storey car park, how green is that, and a leisure centre. Well, Epping voters probably know who their councillors are. The plan predicated on housing numbers is presented for approval at a time when Michael Gove is beginning to backtrack, as has been quoted by Councillor Whitehouse. But how long, of course, will Mr. Gove last? And will his successors follow him any more than Eric Pickles did John Prescott? We have before us, as I say, an imperfect plan. I'm not full of enthusiasm for it, and I will not use the superlatives that the administration will no doubt put into their press notice they issue tomorrow. The most I can say is that what we have might have been much worse, and it might just form a basis for going ahead. to adapt when I said about the budget, what I said about the budget, in this local plan, there is a lot of pain, but not much gain. I would just draw attention to the 4th paragraph of the letter from the City of London, which you have in front of you. And I too would draw attention to the 400-metre boundary around the SAC as essentially a highly restricted development zone or a no development zone. I know there is the infamous footnote which says it's not a no development zone, but as the Conservatives of the Forest say, we are already finding ourselves having to challenge site-level HRAs at High Beach and elsewhere. And I, for one, give notice that I will be challenging many of these habitat assessments if they impinge on the very sensitive zone near our forest. On the whole, I am willing to give the plan a go. I think we have procrastinated far too long, as I've said. What there is a basis possibly for going forward, but it is not an unsullied basis, and it contains still many objectionable features. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rackham?
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Can you stand up, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll say that again. This is an observation. A few days ago, I was walking my dog and I met an 87-year-old lady who lived in the almshouses in Loughton. We got chatting and I noticed that she had an 04 plate VW Polo. I mentioned that she may be caught by the ULEZ if Sadiq Khan succeeded in expanding it to the whole of London. She told me that the earlier expansion, which took the ULEZ out to the A406 in 2021, had already stopped her from visiting her family in Wanstead. She also told me that she filled her car up once in November last year and then again in early January this year because she did so little driving. Yet she's liable to pay a £12.50 charge to go and visit her family. I campaigned against the expansion in 2018 and again before the 2021 mayoral election. And as Sir Ian Duncan Smith's political organiser, I'm fighting against it again. And this time, the whole of the London Conservative Party is fighting it. So I'm not going to vote for this to be imposed here by a Conservative administration because, can you hear me out please? Because Sadiq Khan will use this against the Conservative campaign in London. And the same arguments that I have been making against the ULEZ for more than 5 years apply here. There is little evidence that imposing a charge will do anything to reduce actual emissions. Those who have compliant vehicles will continue to drive. Those who don't but need to drive to work will pay. And those who can't afford to pay the charge will either drive further to avoid it, like the lady in the almshouses in Loughton, or will stop going out. With all the terrible consequences that will have on our mental health, I'm sorry, but I can't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Rackham. I'm looking at, yes, Councillor Bedford, because I don't think ULEZ has come into this at all.
No. ULEZ is nothing to do with us. That's the Mayor of London's decision. And totally, we vehemently, as a council, objected very strongly to the ULEZ being expanded further. The Mayor, of his own fruition, decided to ignore all the local councils that surround the edge of Epping Forest District and the edges of London and decided to impose the ULEZ from October of this year without considering the thoughts of other local councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And can I assure you and fellow members that you've got a very calm Councillor Murray this evening. I just want to make some general remarks and then explain in detail, just like when we had the original plan in front of us. I can't support this tonight. I think we all recognise that this is probably the most important strategic plan that this council has had for many years. I certainly recognise this vote this evening as probably one of the most important votes I've taken part in the last 40 years. It's that important. I do want to ask a question, and I'm quite happy to hold my contribution to await an answer, because this is of such importance to our district going forward, and because I see this really as a planning issue. Yes, a strategic planning issue, I understand that. I do think it's quite fair for me to ask whether any of the groups are having a whip vote tonight. So I'm really asking that of all the group leaders, Loughton residents, the Liberal Democrats, and of course the Conservatives who hold a majority. Are we having a whip vote tonight, or are members free to vote how they wish on what is essentially a planning matter? I'm quite happy to hold my speech as I've asked that question, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Whitbread, do you wish to respond to that? On behalf of the Conservative group.
Chairman, no comment at the moment.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Pond, do you wish to respond to that? Caroline Pond?
Chairman, point of order.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works in the chamber. You can't ask a question for people across the council.
Right, in that case, I'll look for advice from officers on that. The advice I've been given is that you could ask the question of one member, but not the whole group, all the groups.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep to the spirit of how I started my remarks this evening. I wasn't attempting to be difficult. I think it's just quite a reasonable question to ask. It's essentially a planning issue, though a strategic planning issue. It's going to impact our district going forward long after I've gone. And it's quite reasonable to ask on which basis individual members are making their decision. Are they free to make the decision that they feel is right for their communities in this district, or is there some political whipping involved? So I don't think it was an unreasonable question to ask. I think it's quite odd that people aren't prepared to answer it, but they may well answer it later on in the debate. So I'm in a very positive mood tonight. A couple of other introductory comments, and then I will explain why I'm going to be voting against. Like Councillor Pond, very pleased to see that Jessel Green is no longer in the development. That was our village green. A playground at one end, a pub at the other end, surrounded completely by housing on all 5 sides, because it's not an exact square. You can't get more of a village green than that, surrounded by housing in its entirety, a pub at one end, a playground at the other end, and for whatever reason this council thought they had the right to build on that village green. People in Loughton are very forgiving, so we have forgiven, but we won't forget. We won't forget that that was something that only the inspector, the first inspector, saved us from. And the reason why we won't forget, Madam Chairman, is that that was the only village green that I can think of in the area that the majority group thought it was appropriate to build on. The only community green. I can't think of another community green surrounded entirely by housing, with a pub, with a playground, that they thought it was acceptable to try and build on. And it cost Loughton Town Council £40,000 to have proper representation at the proper stage of the inspector. That wasn't the only thing that the £40,000 was spent on, but it was the main thing, and I've got no doubt that it was the right thing to do, because we had to stop it, and therefore we needed specialist planning lawyer advice. But I think the people of Loughton do resent very greatly that the parish was forced to spend that sum of money to stop a proposal that many of us see as vindictive. As I say, we're forgiven, because we're that type of people in Loughton, but we won't forget. I also want to say that I recognise that the hard work that has gone into this plan, and I think the various portfolio holders, and I think the planning officers, that needs to be recognised tonight. So I do recognise that. And I also recognise that there is a balance, and no one here is voting completely for development and lack of concern for our environment, and particularly the forest, which I will reference later, and other people voting completely against development and for our environment. It is a balance. But I have to say, Madam Chairman, in my opinion, and I'm not a specialist, I don't claim to be a specialist, but local councillors are elected to make a judgment on things representing people and their own judgment. They can't be a specialist on everything they're asked to vote on. But in my view, this doesn't get the balance right between those various factors. The balance has been, within this local plan, is too great towards development and not enough concern and protection for our environment. So let me get to the precise reasons why I'm going to be voting against this tonight, Madam Chairman. And there are 4 main reasons, and I'll keep them as short as I possibly can. And I can keep the first one fairly short, because Councillor Whitehouse, I think, dealt with it really well. Many of the assumptions that started this process in terms of what the government was expecting of us have changed. I was aware of that. Anyone who has followed carefully the national debate on that, because of the work of MPs, have changed. And she's quoted the letter and she's quoted the guidance. So I would say many of the assumptions underlying this local plan no longer hold. The second reason why I want to vote against this tonight is I just think that the impact on existing communities is unacceptable. It will change the character of the Epping Forest District forever. Change can be positive. Change should be positive. But I think much of this local plan is change in the wrong direction and is negative change. And I will focus particularly on Epping. Not a town I represent, not a town I live in. And I don't want to upset people, but it's not a town I particularly want to live in. I'm very happy living in Loughton. I've managed it for 64 years, and I don't think, I'm only going to leave Loughton when I'm in a box and in a black car, I think. So I'm very happy in Loughton. But I do understand Epping. I have lots of friends in Epping, and I think this local plan changes the character, or will change the character, of Epping forever. This is a lovely market town. There would be possible to have greater development if it was sensible development. Councillor Chris Pond has already mentioned the multi-storey car park, and again, I've got nothing against Ilford and nothing against Croydon. I'm sure the people who live there are perfectly happy with their community and love it. But when I think of multi-storey car parks, I don't think of an Essex market town, I'm afraid. I do think of Ilford. I do think of Croydon. And that's not Epping. So that's another reason why I'll be voting against it. 3rd out of 4, and you'll be pleased that there's only 4 reasons. I think we talk about the forest too glibly. And I don't mean that nastily. Epping Forest. But how many people here really understand the importance of that ancient forest? And I think this local plan seriously endangers Epping Forest. It's the largest open space in London, 6,000 acres, I think. I haven't walked or run all of it. Sometimes it seems as if I have. But it's a massive open space, the biggest in London. Much of the forest is of national and international significance. 2/3 of it is either SSI or a site of special area of conservation. It's got some of the oldest living plants in Europe that are absolutely centuries old. Now, I'm accused sometimes of living in the past, but even I don't go back to Anglo-Saxon times, but some of the plants in Epping Forest do. We've got 55,000 ancient trees, more than any other site in the country. And I've deliberately spent some time about the forest tonight, because we sometimes say, oh, we need to protect Epping Forest, and we just use 2 words to describe it. We are talking about something that is internationally unique. And I'm afraid, and I know that the Epping Forest Heritage Trust, but I don't speak on their behalf. I mean, I've read their website, but I've not had any communication with them on this issue. I make that absolutely clear. I'm not whipped by anyone apart from myself, so I'm a completely free, independent person that can speak as they feel. But they are of that concern as well. And Councillor Chris Pond has already talked about the issues that we're facing up in High Beach. And that will happen in any of those sites that are 400 metres from the forest. Real danger to our forest, and we haven't got the balance right. My last argument, and I hope I have demonstrated to members that I've given this a lot of thought and a lot of reading, I haven't just taken a knee-jerk reaction, is that I don't think the main modifications go far enough. There should be a plan-wide approach to assessing the impact of this local plan as it moves forward, because I've been here long enough to know that it is going to go through, and if I was to answer my question that I posed at the beginning, I think there probably is a whip vote, though I don't know that. So, you know, if I've made an incorrect assumption, I apologise. So the main modifications don't go far enough. I think that the site of alternative natural green spaces, which are about trying to take the impact of the forest, called SANGs, that they're not going to work. They really are not sufficiently attractive enough to move people from the forest to the to these areas. So in short, Madam Chairman, I would ask members, please, think carefully how you're going to vote, and I accept that there are good reasons maybe to have a different view, but ask yourself, have we actually got the balance right between development and the protection of our environment, particularly the forest? And I would argue that we haven't.
Can I ask you to wind up, Councillor Murray?
I'm absolutely winding up. Just 2 more sentences. Does this plan have such a major impact on our existing communities that are acceptable? And I think the conclusion is no. And I would just finish where I started. I think members of the public have got the right to know whether councillors are voting as non-whipped councillors tonight. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Can I just remind members, yes, I know you're clapping and applauding, but as I said at the very beginning, it is a meeting in public, it is not a public meeting. Councillor Whitbread, I think, wanted to just say...
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify the situation on the debate this evening. This is not a planning debate, and we have to be very clear about that. You made it very clear at the outset, Chairman. This is not a planning debate. This is a binary vote, yes or no, on the local plan that has been found sound by the professional inspector. It is not for us to talk about planning issues this evening. It is not to us to get into the weeds of individual policies. But and with regards to my group and whether my group, when my group meets, we meet in private. That is a private discussion. I understand something has leaked out to everyone's Epping Forest this evening. I don't know who made that leak, but my group's discussions are always in private, and my group work on that basis.
Thank you. If I can go to Councillor Amos. Sorry. Sorry, if you could just wait one moment, Councillor Amos. I think Councillor Bedford wished to bring in something on...
Thank you. I just wanted to address Councillor Murray's questions around do we provide sufficient protection, really, to the Epping Forest. The Inspector has considered the issue of the effect of the plan on the Epping Forest SOC, and he is satisfied that the plan as proposed to be modified provides the necessary protection to the forest. And I must add as well, further to that, that the Corporation of London have come up with a strategy to improve the forest after many, many years of neglect when the lopping people were removed from the forest and the beech trees grew out of control. they have now instigated a specific plan which covers every area of the forest under their control. They are going back in to prune and lop a lot of the original beech trees. The problem is when they removed the loppers of the forest, the beech trees tended to grow in a Y formation, which placed an amount of stress on the ancient beech trees near the base, which caused them to fall and split, as can be seen by the vast number of trees that have died in the forest recently. The rest of the forest is being protected by the air quality monitoring that will be being brought forward, and I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, apologies, Councillor Amos, but if you like now to.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, although I've only been a member of this council for a few months, I would like to associate myself with the remarks that have been made, thanking the officers, the portfolio holders and the councillors who have contributed to this work. I have taken an interest in it for some time, and it is quite evident for anybody reading the plan that a great deal of work has gone into it. Over the period that the plan was being produced, the political climate has changed somewhat. We were urged to build, build, build. And then recently, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities wrote on the 5th of December, as has already been referred to, a letter to members of Parliament. And I have to say, I didn't ever envisage that I would be standing in this chamber complimenting Mr. Gove for what he has written, but I certainly think it is a paper that is a letter that should be studied by all. The climate has changed from the top down. The climate has changed so that the local authorities have much more, and residents are much more central to the way the plan is devised. Now, I know, and I've read, of course, Mr. Blaw's report and the other reports, and I appreciate that Mr. Blaw says that 11,400 is the correct number of dwellings. But there have been several changes from the ONS regarding population projections, and I do wonder whether that is still the right number. If it was less, it would be of considerable assistance to the air pollution mitigation strategy and to the use of Epping Forest. We also see from Mr. Gove's letter that he is urging authorities not to review the green belt in order to obtain more building land. And I appreciate, as Councillor Bedford has said, that it's quite a small proportion of the land of green belt that's being taken, but I think we should look at the possibility of not building on green belt land as Mr. Gove has urged. It has been said that if we do not adopt this plan, then developers have a right to, under Section 11 of the NPPF of 2021, to develop lands. But if one looks at footnote 7, it says that this right does not extend to Greenbelt. And Mr. Gove has also said in his letter that he's looking at regulations to make sure that developers don't take unfair advantage of maybe a delay in adopting a local plan. He has also said that he is prepared to extend for 2 years the time in which a local plan has to be developed. I think we have the opportunity to improve on our air pollution mitigation strategy without having to go along the line of some rather bizarre proposals that have arisen in the past. I think that we can save a little of the green belt, and I think that we should pause at this stage and say, is this really what we want, or are we in danger of overdeveloping the district? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Kaufmann, did you indicate?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hope I don't start rambling, because there's so much to talk about. So I've been a council member for 8 or 10 years, and there's been a lot of effort has gone in by people across the chamber here, this side, the officers, respect everything that's been done, a massive document. And for those that are watching or in the, we have made some wins. Obviously, I'm Loughton-centric. We had a massive fight and we took Jessel Green out. What a win that was. We've actually took out the local plan, the station car parks. Unbelievable. We had London Transport wanted to put 8-storey buildings up, I think it was, on Loughton car park. Horrendous. Nowhere to park for the commuters. And massive developments. I think the same for Debden. Limes Farm from Chigwell, I think Limes Farm was taken out of the plan. So these are massive wins, and people think, you know, I feel there's enormous angst amongst the electorate and frustration that we've not done enough. We've lost Borders Lane. Every time I drive down Borders Lane, it's a shocker that we let that go through, because the one piece of green space in Borders Lane has now got an awful development of it, and it's going to be there for the rest of my life and all of our lives, and we couldn't stop it. I don't think there's enough here in terms of infrastructure. I personally have suffered with the lack of availability of getting to a doctor. 3 days you can have an appointment. I know that's not the responsibility of people in this chamber. I know it's the National Health Trusts, but somehow people are frustrated, and whether it's through more rigorous planning enforcement of planning applications that we get sufficient money or provision that stands out from this plan, because this plan does not do anything to provide more doctors, more mental health, all the things we know we need. That being said, I firmly believe we have to have a plan. If we don't have a plan, decisions in this area are decided by some person in Bristol, and we've got no control, and they've got no idea what they're doing, bless them, and we are exposed. So we have to have a plan. There's not enough in here about good design. We're seeing terrible things being built in the district. The planning office is under immense pressure. I'm not sure of the numbers, 1,500 applications a month or something ridiculous are coming in at a time when we haven't got the resources to deal with them. So the council's under massive strain, resourcing's under massive strain. So I'm very on the fence with this. I really respect the portfolio holder in this case and the team across the chamber. I would like to hear from them, and I'd like to hear from other members on that side of the chamber, please. Do they really support this? Can they please not just sit there? Can they speak up and say what they really believe? And I would like to hear from the portfolio holder. This has taken us since 2006 to do. Is it sufficiently in date for you to say we really have to go for it? Because if the political situation is changing, can we pause? Are we just putting an ostrich, putting our heads in the sand? I want to know we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go any further forward, can I just remind everybody, please, to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off so that we don't have ringing again. Thank you. I know that Councillor Phillip, who was a previous portfolio holder, has indicated that he would like to speak, so perhaps he will respond to some of those as well. So if I can go to Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the contributions we've had so far. Yes, I know technically our last plan expired in 2006, and there were a couple of meetings in 2007, but realistically, nothing actually started on this local plan until 2011. And I do remember, if the Chamber will permit me, a little reminiscing. I remember going with the then leader up to speak to Steve Quatermain, who was the government's chief planning officer at the time, with Mr. Richardson's predecessor there as well. who straight-facedly sat in front of me and said, there's absolutely no reason why you can't get a local plan done in 12 months or at a push 18 months. Clearly not the case. And actually, that does take me on to something that's been raised tonight already. If we think we voted to send this plan to the inspector in December 2017, we're now in March 2023. A 2-year hiatus isn't even enough for us to get the plan back through the inspector again. So looking at that as a way of doing things doesn't work. There's been a lot of work, and it has evolved, Councillor Kaufman, as we've gone through. There have been changes from the situation that we were in 2010. I won't go into the politics of that, but we have evolved things. We took a very clear view right from the start about what we wanted to do. And I'm proud to say that both with elected members, but also with the public, we have done more consultation and more effective consultation on the local plan than anywhere else. I don't agree with Councillor Pond. It wasn't procrastination. It was multiple consultations, and multiple consultations always at more than the minimum allowed. We kept doing that, so we got the input. I mean, we must remember, we started with the issues and options going out in 2012. We had another consultation in 2016 and another one in 2017. And we've had 2 main modification consultations. And we've had a full-blown inquiry in public where anyone who wanted to could come and put their viewpoints forward. All the viewpoints that are coming out at the moment have already been sifted through by the inspector. A couple of things I do completely agree with Councillor Kaufman on. The development in Borders Lane, which we fought against significantly for that particular development, is an appalling one. We refused it. It was granted on appeal. We did refuse it. It was granted on appeal.
The appeal was on non-determination because you didn't determine.
We refused that application. We asked for an extension because they weren't complying, and the inspector chose to ignore the fact that it is one of the most sustainable locations in the district, and went for significant amounts of parking that we said didn't need to be there. What we don't want to do, what we mustn't get ourselves in a position, is a position that we have all our planning applications either being determined by the government or being determined by the planning inspector in Bristol, because we know from experience that doesn't work for our district. I do have to say a little bit about the multi-storey car park in Epping. One of the things there does allow us to build more on brownfield, which is what we're trying to do. We're not going for excessive parking there. I agree about the East of England plan numbers. They were absolutely appalling. We were looking at 6,000 houses just on North Weald Airfield. Now, that would have put a real pressure on our infrastructure. There is infrastructure in the local plan. There is infrastructure requirements. They come forward when you're looking at planning applications, so we don't need to look at that today. I agree that it is an imperfect plan, Councillor Pond. I think I've been on record several times in this chamber saying there's something in this plan for everyone to hate. It's not perfect. Is it as good as we can get? I genuinely think it will be. It's very important that we've got it, because we know that there are people who would like to start building in the district in places that we have ruled out for very good reasons. We need to have the protection to allow us to do that. I would tend to disagree with Councillor Murray, and it may not come as a surprise, but I don't think the impact on the existing communities needs to be bad. If we go for good design, it's a definite improvement to the areas, and Councillor Kaufman may know that Plans East we've had success in refusing a couple of planning applications on design issues. Unfortunately, at least one of those hasn't been backed up by the inspectorate, who obviously has a different view of what good design is from us. The main modifications, we have no option. That's what the inspector says needs to be there to make the plan sound. Councillor Bedford's already talked about the main modifications, and the SANGs in there. I think, Councillor Murray, actually, if the SANGs are developed properly, people will use them. rather than having to travel to the forest. They won't replace the forest. They can't replace the forest. The forest is something really special, something that we're really lucky to have, something that this plan helps to protect, as reflected in the letter we've seen from the City of London. The ONS projections have been mentioned a couple of times. They've gone through and been updated as we went through the plan. We did an assessment when the inspector asked us to look at the latest figures to make sure that we were still aligned, and the conclusion there was that we were. It protects the Greenbelt. We did an awful lot of work looking at the Greenbelt and looking at what the purposes of the Greenbelt were, and then looking to see the bits of that that were best suited to keep and the ones that were not. I completely agree with Councillor Kaufman about the station car parks. The idea of multi-storey towers on the station car parks was something we said we weren't going to accept. The inspector agreed with us and said to Transport for London, unless you have them down, they wouldn't come and talk to it, so we've taken them out. The real key, and then I think coming on to doctors, it's not really infrastructure. We can put into planning applications in Section 106s funding for doctors. We can put in funding for surgeries, construct surgeries. But unless the doctors actually want to come and work, and there is, and I speak here as somebody who has a daughter who is a doctor, they do not, in general, want to come and work in general practice. I don't hold out that this is the perfect plan. I don't think, realistically, there is such thing as a perfect plan. You cannot get there. There will always be a balance. But I think, as I said when I stood up in 2011 talking about this, we've aimed to protect our communities. We've aimed to protect our green belt. We've hit a balance between what we need to do and where we need to get to. I think this plan delivers it, and therefore I think the right thing for us to do is to adopt it, move forward. Don't step away in your planning committees from actually analysing those applications properly, using the plan with its policies to get what you need out of it. So learn your plan and make use of it, but do adopt it.
Thank you. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Perhaps I'll address Councillor Murray's point first. I mean, I've worked with my colleagues on this local plan pretty much since it started. We've put in representations at every stage of the local plan, put in representations to the main modifications. I spoke at the examination in public, so I think we come from the same place on this. But I never think you should come to a debate 100% sure of how you're going to vote, because then what is the point of having a debate? You know, I think it is important to listen to what people say and listen to the arguments that other people put. Part of this debate, of course, is about new homes for Epping Forest. I want to address that point first, because there is a need for new homes in Epping Forest. You only need to talk to the 20, 30, 40-year-olds still living in their parents' spare bedrooms because they can't find somewhere affordable to live near their job. Talk to some of the local employers, particularly public services, jobs that can't be done remotely, as we heard at some of St John's Church the other day at a presentation, who can't recruit staff because they come to the interview and then find they can't afford the housing when they're looking in the estate agent's windows, or I suppose go on the web these days. Or talk to people bringing up families in flats because they can't find the affordable family homes they need. But it's not just about the number of homes, the local plan. It's also about how many, about where, crucially, what mix of homes are they actually meeting the local housing need, and infrastructure that's going to support any new development and any new homes. Back in December 2017, we've heard that date several times tonight, my group put forward several amendments. We put forward an amendment to safeguard a library in Epping, because the plan is written, proposed developing the library site without having a replacement in Epping. We put forward an amendment to keep a leisure centre or a sports centre in Epping, because at the time there's no replacement site in Epping for a replacement sports centre when the plan wanted to develop the sports centre site. and the replacement site was slated for North Weald. And we've put forward an amendment to delete the allocation in South Epping, given the multiple issues with that site, some of which we've heard from others tonight, and because of the fact the plan could be delivered without that site, and incidentally still could be. I'm pleased to say the first of those amendments on the library was agreed with some tweaks to the wording on the night. The second, we had to wait for the main modifications to get a site allocated for replacements, to get replacement sports centre in Epping written into the plan. And the third one, while the number of houses at South Epping has reduced, many of the issues remain, not least because one of that ways that site was promoted originally by some members was to say, well, it will provide a relief road for Epping. It will take away the congestion in Brook Road and Ivy Chimneys and Bridge Hill because there'll be a bridge over the railway line. That was never really a realistic option, and we've seen over the period of the plan how that's moved from a vehicular crossing to essentially just an upgrade on the existing footbridge to allow cycles as well. And that extra traffic generated by that site will need to funnel its way up past the forest or through Epping. So, and there are other areas where the plan has actually weakened or been hollowed out over the period. I think the infrastructure, which again was one of the things that was sold as a big benefit of the plan, we've gradually seen the infrastructure listed in some of the site-specific allocations withdrawn or reworded or allocated to make it possible rather than essential. And we've seen the infrastructure delivery plan relegated essentially to something we've got to consider, not something which has to be delivered. And we've seen in the inspector's report the inspector say that to say that if the amount of development can't be delivered without a chargeable CAZ, there will have to be a CAZ. When it seems to me it should be the other way around. It should be if there's so much development, it's deleterious to the forest without the imposition of a chargeable CPZ. It's the location and the scale of development that should be changed. So, as was said, there's just two choices tonight: to vote for the plan or to vote against the plan. We're beyond the stage where we can put forward amendments, sadly. I recognise the Conservative group's probably got the votes in the chamber to get this through, but I think it is too flawed a plan for me to support unless I hear something outstanding in the next few speeches. There are issues on either side and risks on both sides. I think we've got to remember that any planning application, whether the plan's in date or not, still has to be assessed against the MPPPF criteria on green belt, still has to show it doesn't adversely affect the special area of conservation. It is more desirable to have a plan than not have a plan, but there are real issues about having a flawed plan as opposed to the right plan. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm not. Councillor Williamson.
Done it. Oh, right. It's magic. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really to answer Councillor Kaufman and maybe Councillor Murray's question earlier. The local plan is probably the main reason I became a councillor. I've followed it very carefully all the way through. I actually spoke at the public examination on behalf of Buckhurst Hill. I take Councillor Phillips' comment about hate. I think it's a bit strong. There are things in this local plan I probably dislike, but on balance, I think it's where we should be, and we should be voting for this, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't going to speak, but I've lived in Waltham Abbey for over 70 years and been a councillor for 19. So I have attended hundreds of hours on all these meetings and workshops to work out for a local plan. And I remember when it first started, there were certain councillors, not all of them here still now, that have made it very clear that we're having no developments in Loughton, we're having none in Thagan Boys, stick them all in Waltham Abbey. And there were some that were extremely rude about it, and they were serious. Now, I don't think we'll ever get a perfect local plan, but there's been so much money spent on this, money, council tax money, and so many hours and hours spent that I think it's time that we just get on with it and agree it and just go from there. We'll never get a perfect plan. I don't agree with everything, and I certainly didn't agree with everything in Waltham Abbey. And it's been shared across the district, which I think is right.
Thank you. Councillor Mead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, this is a huge responsibility, this vote tonight, because it affects future generations. I just wanted absolute clarity what the option is if we said no. It looks like it won't be no, looking opposite. But if it was a no, what was the alternative if it was no tonight?
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Mead. The option is we either adopt or we don't adopt. If we don't adopt, then tomorrow morning other developers outside of the district, anywhere in the district, will be subject to a person throwing in an application for houses anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's Greenbelt or not, because we won't have an adopted plan. Anything that's put forward for a planning development will be seriously considered, not possibly by us, but the Secretary of State could step in. So we have to be very careful. If you do not adopt the plan tonight, you're leaving the council wide open for speculative planners and developers coming forward anywhere, I mean anywhere in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. So got anybody else? No? Councillor Bedford, do you wish to put the recommendations to the...
Thank you. Members, we've debated this quite fully this evening. We've all had a chance to say what we think. And as quite rightly Councillor Phillip has already said, there's something in this plan that everybody hates. We have to seriously consider now going forward, do we adopt or do we reject the plan? My motion is we adopt the plan as laid out on pages 5 and 6, and that's points 1 to 4. Madam Chairman, I would like to put that forward to a vote, and I believe we would like to have that recorded. Can I have any seconders for the recorded vote?
Sorry, Councillor Barlow, we've gone past the point, unless it was a point of order.
I've just asked for that.
Well, sorry? Yeah, we need 5 members.
5 members to stand
for a recorded vote. I think we have more than 5, so...
Well done,
so if I can go over to... Sorry, I'm used to finding my Democratic Service officers on my left-hand side, and of course they're on their right tonight. So if I can go over to Jackie Lever to take us through the recorded vote.
For.
Councillor Amos.
Against.
Councillor Avey.
For.
Councillor Balcom.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Barlow.
Against.
Councillor Bedford.
Adopt the plan.
Councillor Barnott.
For.
Councillor Bolton.
Councillor Bobbin, for.
Councillor Brady. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Burrows.
For.
Councillor Heath.
Against.
Councillor Heather. For. Councillor Herrenkane.
For.
Councillor Sankane. For. Councillor Poutman.
For.
Councillor Kester.
For.
Councillor Lee.
For.
Councillor Leppert.
Against.
Councillor Lyon.
For.
Councillor Matthews.
For.
Councillor McIver. Councillor Mead.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Nweke.
Abstain.
Councillor Owen.
Against.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Aniket Patel.
For.
Councillor Smruti Patel.
For.
Councillor Phillip.
For.
Councillor Chris Pond.
Abstain, Madam.
Councillor Caroline Pond.
For.
Councillor Pugsley. Councillor Rackham. Councillor Rixley. Councillor Sartin.
For.
Councillor Stalker.
For.
Councillor Stocker.
For.
Councillor Sanger.
For.
Councillor Vaz.
For.
Councillor Chris Whitbread.
For.
Councillor Holly Whitbread.
For.
Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor John Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor Ken Williamson. Councillor Wixley.
Abstain.
And Councillor Yerrell.
For.
Chairman, we have 37 for, 9 against and 3 abstentions.
Thank you very much. So those recommendations are agreed and the local plan has now been approved. Thank you all very much for your attendance this evening. We have got no matters to exclude public and press, so I close the meeting at 14 minutes past 8.